excited to share with you today my Nutella sourdough bread. Now I base this off of my sourdough croissant bread, and I like that because it just gives those buttery, flaky layers. You could also use the same method with a regular loaf of sourdough. So either way, it will work. But for this video, the first main section of the video is the sourdough croissant bread, how that's made, and then the last part of the video shows how I actually add the Nutella to it, how I bake it, why I bake it in a loaf pan, all of those things. So if you've already made the croissant loaf, skip to that section. If you haven't made the croissant bread yet, you're gonna see the first part in the video and then you'll see the shaping part after. This is such a good one. My kids ask me for it all the time. You can also use it and make your own homemade Nutella if you want to, which is delicious, or spread it with cinnamon sugar, anything. Absolutely incredible. I know you're gonna love this one. It is nighttime and I am mixing up my levain for tomorrow's croissant bread. In the recipe, I have it mixed as a 1 to 10 to 10 ratio. You can change that ratio up to whatever works for you. So I've just mixed it up, and then when I wake up in the morning, it's going to be bubbly active, ready for me to mix up my dough. Pick the ratio that works for you. If you wanted to mix this the morning of, you could do that and use more flour and more water with your starter. Do a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. Anything like that works, but you just want to mix up your starter so that you have it ripe and active, ready to go when you're ready to mix this dough up. Okay, it's the next morning. We're back. Let me show you the starter, the levain. It's looking so good. That is ready for me to bake with. It is bubbly active, doubled in size, ready to go. If I bang it on the counter, sometimes I like to do that. See how it falls? Smells like milky sweet. Perfect. So for this croissant bread, you are going to use 120 grams of your active levain or sourdough starter. So I just dumped that in the bowl to start with. I upped this a little from my regular recipe because we're gonna be keeping this dough cold. That's one of the things that's really important about this bread is the temperature. You don't want the butter to get completely melted into the dough. You kind of still want some little butter flakes. It's gonna depend on the kind of butter that you use too, but you want to keep this dough at a cool temperature while it's fermenting. So I put my levain in there, and now I'm gonna add my water. With sourdough recipes, the temperature of your water really impacts the temperature of your dough. So I'm using a cooler water to mix this dough because I want to keep my temperature right around 70 degrees throughout the bulk fermentation of this loaf. I also kept this, when I was developing this recipe, I kept the water content a little bit less than my regular classic sourdough loaf because I knew I was going to be adding the butter, and I wanted this to be easy for anybody to work with. So it is a little bit of a lower hydration. If you wanted to make this higher hydration, you can definitely do that. If you have a favorite sourdough recipe, you can use a lot of these techniques with that favorite recipe. I'm just kind of explaining why I did the things that I did in developing this recipe. Okay, then we're gonna add in our salt, which is 10 grams. Now I'm mixing this all together because I wanted this recipe to be a little more approachable for a beginner. And you get like some complicated, with the folds and the temperature and all of that. So I wanted to keep this part kind of simple. But if you want to autolyse, fermentalize, you can definitely do that and delay adding the salt in there. Okay, and then we're adding in our bread flour. We're doing 500 grams of bread flour. And if you go a little bit over, then I just pull some of it back out. Put it back in my bag. All right, 500 grams, and then we just mix it up. So that's the first step. I'm gonna let this, after it's mixed together, I'm going to just let it rest for about half an hour. And then we'll come back and do the first set of folds. Now I do want to keep it still in kind of a cool place. This is a tricky part about this loaf, is really maintaining that temperature. And so if you aren't used to taking the temperature of your dough or really knowing, you know, what the temperature of your dough is, that could be a little bit tricky or new for you. If you're used to like temping your dough, then it won't be that big of a challenge. Okay, so I am just mixing this up together, and you get this nice little ball of dough. I like to kind of make sure that all of the flour has been properly absorbed so you don't get any like chunks of flour in the dough. But basically, that's all you're gonna do. Now I'm gonna cover this, let it sit. I do wanna temp it really quick to just, because I wanna know what temperature is my dough. Right now, mine's actually at like 74. So I think I'm actually gonna stick this in the fridge right now for the first 30 minutes, help to bring the temperature down a little bit, because I don't want it to be too warm when I add the butter in. I just pulled my dough out of the fridge. Let's temp it and see. It's been 30 minutes. Checking out the temperature. Okay, it is down now to like 68, 67, which is where I want it. My kitchen is not very warm, but I used, I guess, a warmer dough. So we're gonna do our first set of stretch and folds. Pull it up, fold it over, pull it up, fold it over, pull it up, fold it over. I do not need to put this back into my fridge now. The dough is already the temperature that I want it to be. At this point, I did my stretch and folds. I can cover it back up. If I wanted to add a little more strength to my dough right now, I could just by I kind of like to do this motion in my bowl, and that will just help to strengthen some of the gluten strands. This is the point that I kind of want to do that. You can also take your dough and slap it down and fold it over like this. This just helps to increase some of the strength in your dough. Do you have to do this? No, you don't have to, but it can help you to have a stronger dough. So I do sometimes like to, and then sometimes I skip it. Just kind of depends on what finished product you're going for. So I'm gonna cover this up now and let it ferment ferment another 30 minutes, and then we're gonna add in the butter. While the dough is resting, I'm going to grate up the butter, and then I will keep it in the fridge or the freezer, and it will be ready when I'm ready to add it into my dough. I have tried this recipe with American butter, which has a lower fat content, and I've tried it with European butter. Both taste delicious. The American butter tends to have more of like the flakes. You can see them inside the dough. The European butter with that higher fat content tends to not melt, but soften a lot more. So that was just really cold butter from my fridge. This is an American butter. I will show you the European butter too, so you can see the difference in how it grates up. This one, the American butter, I feel like is okay to do really cold chilled from the fridge. You can also do the European butter that way, but it's a little bit messier. So if you can freeze the European butter, it's even better. I'm gonna stick this in the fridge now, or you could do the freezer to get it really nice and chilled before I add it into my dough. And here's my Kerrygold, which is kind of the European style. It has a higher percentage of fat in it. It still grates up just fine, but it is like, I can tell it's melting a lot quicker, even just in my fingers. And so if you can freeze this butter, it can work a little bit better for this kind. There you go. So this is the European one. I feel like it also clings together a little bit more. I think it's just the higher butter content or fat content. It doesn't have as much water in it. So I'm gonna go ahead and chill this one as well. And I will use that one later. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes. My dough has spread out a little bit. I'm going to add in half of the butter. Always like to check the temperature again with this loaf. Normally I'm not this into checking the temperature all of the time, but with this loaf especially, I am. So I'm gonna add half of the butter just right on top of the loaf. Not the loaf, the dough. And then we're just gonna stretch and fold it in. The butter, because it's been chilled, will bring down the temperature a little bit of this dough. So you may be wondering why this actually works, because you might be thinking, oh, I thought that you had to have really warm dough for the fermentation to work. Well, it can work at lower temperatures, and that's what we're banking on with this loaf, is that the fermentation will work, but we need to see a larger rise from the dough as it ferments. So you really want to keep it around that 70 degrees. So it will still ferment, but it'll just take a lot longer. And that's why we added in more starter or levain into this dough than a traditional loaf, to give it a little boost to help it to rise a little bit more. So that's the first inclusion of butter. I'm gonna put this, rest the butter back in the fridge, and then in about 30 minutes, we will add the second inclusion of butter. Oh, let me take the temperature and see if that brought it down a little bit. It did. Brought it down about 1 degree or so. So it's going to take a little bit of time to get it back up to, we want it to be 70 right now. Mine's about 66 with that. So I'm gonna let it sit and be okay, but once all the butter has been included, I will try to get it up to 70. I may use my bread proofer, I'll put it in a warmer place, and I just kind of have to manage that temperature. That really is the trickiest part of this loaf, is managing the temperature, making sure you get a rise out of it before you shape it. All right, it's time to add in the last bit of butter. Now, remember if you're using European butter, I think it's kind of better to do it frozen. This was just chilled and it falls apart better than the European butter. It comes apart better. So you're just gonna do a stretch and fold to keep that butter nice and flaky in the dough. So we finished adding the butter into the dough. We're gonna do one more set of stretch and folds before we let this rise. And we're gonna let this rise eventually, so it's about 70% risen and filling a lot of this bowl. We need to see that rise for it to be fermented well enough to be able to bake it. So we'll come back in 30 minutes. Last set of stretch and folds. See how that dough and the butter is just chunks all throughout? That's kind of what you're looking for, especially if you're using the American style of butter. The European style will spread a little bit more. Still both good. Good option. Here's the European style, so you can see how it spreads a little more. It's okay, you still just want to keep it at right in that like 70-degree range. And it just laminates all throughout. We're gonna let this rise. We're looking for probably a 70% rise. I'm gonna come back here in the evening when my kids are back home from school and we'll check it out then. Hey, back from all the school stuff, look how much that's risen. So we're gonna take it out of the bowl and stretch it on the countertop. This is called laminating. We don't want to tear the dough, but we just want to stretch it fairly thinly on a clean counter. And once it's stretched thin, you're going to take your Nutella and spread it right in the center of the dough. Now you can use a homemade Nutella, you can use store-bought Nutella, you can use cinnamon sugar, anything that you want to roll up, but follow this method to get a really nice swirl throughout your dough. So after you've covered the middle part of your dough, you're going to fold it up on each side into the center. So you're not overlapping, and then just use your fingers to squeeze that together. And then you're going to spread more Nutella on top of that dough. So that is the main method
to put the Nutella in the center, then fold them over until they meet, pinch them closed, spread more on the top, and then we're going to roll the whole thing up. This creates a signature swirl and looks really nice in a loaf of artisan bread. So starting at one end, you're just going to roll it up. I think this works better for an oval shape or a sandwich loaf. I like baking this bread specifically in a sandwich tin because it really gives those edges that help support the dough so that it will rise really nicely. I do like to grease my sandwich tin. I'll sometimes just put butter in the edges, or you could use parchment paper if you have issues with your bread tin sticking. I like to refrigerate this loaf either overnight or for at least a couple of hours, then pull it out and score it. I actually find one line down the center does better. You can do it this way with the 3 lines, but you'll see how I actually prefer the look of the 1 line down the center. And then I cover it. You do want to steam it. I love this Broad & Taylor that I use for steaming it, but you could just put a loaf pan on top of that loaf pan for steam. Any way that you can get steam into your oven is what you want for those first 25 minutes of the bake. Look how beautiful that loaf looks. That's with just the scoring, the 3 slashes. This one is with the slash all the way down, which I prefer the look of. So look how beautiful that loaf turned out once it's baked completely. Now you're going to watch and see it when I open it up. You have these beautiful ribbons of Nutella all around it. This is crunchy, crispy, and the Nutella inside just makes it absolutely delicious. I will say to check the temperature of your dough when you're pulling it out of the oven, because when you add a swirl inclusion like this, sometimes that dough needs just a little bit longer to bake. I like to make sure it's at least 200 degrees Fahrenheit before pulling it out of the oven, and then let it cool completely, and you get this most delicious sourdough Nutella bread. I think you're going to love it.